Hey, Bernie Borges here. Hey, on the previous episode, I announced that I'm renaming this podcast. Our new name reflects the focus of this podcast. Hey, I hope you like it. Here goes.
Welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, hosted by Bernie Borges. This is the podcast for the modern marketer who wants to hear from their peers in the trenches and the occasional analyst or rockstar influencer sharing strategies and tactics about what's working in modern marketing. Be sure to listen to the end of each episode for Bernie's summary and takeaways so you can plan your next move in your own modern marketing journey.
Hey there. Welcome to episode 237. I'm Bernie Borges, CMO Vengreso, and your host. Hey, thanks for listening. Hey, this is the first episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. Now, the name has changed, but my focus has not. And that is to continue to bring you great interviews with smart, modern marketers who are getting things done. Now, I'm really excited to kick off this new season with someone that's very, very dear to me, and that is Viveka von Rosen. Now, you probably know Viveka. She is widely recognized in modern marketing circles, in addition to being one of my 3 co-founders at Vengreso, where she has the role of being our Chief Visibility Officer. Viv is a popular international keynote speaker, a Forbes top 20 most influential personal branding expert, a published author of 2 books and 2 courses on lynda.com, which was acquired by LinkedIn. And Viv is also frequently on this or that top list of digital and content marketers. And last but not least, Viv is at LinkedIn Expert, as in that is her handle all over the interwebs. With that, Viv, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Awesome. And I love the new name.
Well, thank you. Thank you. As we were talking offline here, it's kind of a long time in the making. As I said in my little intro here, the name has changed, but the focus has not. I'm going to continue to bring great interviews to my listeners around the world who are largely in the marketing realm. So excited to have you as my first guest under the new name. So Viv, let's get right to it.
Sure.
Let's talk about content for sales enablement. The name of the podcast is Modern Marketing Engine.
Exactly.
But look, here's what you and I both know, and I think every listener would agree. The focus of any marketing, modern or not, is to enable sales, is to impact the ability for a company to sell more effectively. So in order for us to talk about content for sales enablement and why it's a thing, like why we're talking about it, let's first begin with kind of the basic, and that is content marketing. Let's begin with a revisit to the definition of what is content marketing. You've been doing it for a long time. That will be a great bridge to our conversation about content for sales enablement.
Perfect. Yeah. And even though Vengreso is, digital sales transformation, when you straddle the line between marketing and sales, I do lean more towards the marketing side of things. That's where my heart belongs. So, and especially content marketing. I'm just a huge fan of creating and publishing content that helps to build visibility around a company, right? So it helps to attract and retain actually your target audience, and ideally to get them to make that buying decision and also to keep them loyal to you. So, we think about Apple and their fantastic marketing and content marketing and the loyalty that they've built with their audience, that we keep coming back and spending all the money over and over and over again. And so it's that content marketing, whether it's print or visual or video or, whatever form it takes. It's creating and publishing content specifically to attract and retain your target audience so that eventually they purchase and continue purchasing from you.
Yep. I always like to say that, you've never really closed a customer for life. You may have closed a sale, you may have closed a transaction, but we have to continually reinforce our brand, our value proposition
That's
to
right.
every customer over and over and over again. It never, ever stops. So content marketing is something that we do, generally speaking, Viv,
Yep.
one to many, right? We're doing it from the company, from the brand
Exactly.
to the marketplace. I mean, you could certainly segment different aspects, elements of your market. I get that. But it's from the company to a group of people. Let's call it that.
Right.
Now, when we talk about content for sales enablement, that's a little bit different. So why don't you tee that up? What do we mean by content for sales enablement?
Yeah, and content for sales enablement is the content that your sales force is going to use in its activity to create more conversations with the prospects and the suspects and get them to convert and get them to make that buying decision. So while creating brand and creating conversations is certainly part of content marketing, this is really about the salespeople. So this is where content marketing, to your point, is one to many. Content for sales enablement is really about the salesperson using a piece or several pieces of content to one other person. And again, there's exceptions. You might get a salesperson who understands the concept of personal branding and creating a personal brand and creating that thought leadership and that subject matter expertise within the industry in order to attract more prospects. And so they might be sharing the content for sales enablement content, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, etc. But generally, when I'm talking about content for sales enablement, I'm talking about a salesperson or a business owner using a piece of content or a few pieces of content with a specific prospect to start a conversation, to answer their questions, to stimulate new questions, to keep them asking questions, but more importantly, to help them make that buying decision. And it's generally one-to-one.
And keep you on the radar, right? If you're the salesperson,
exactly,
on that prospect's radar, prospects, especially in a long sales cycle, can disappear and be hard to contact, hard to re-engage in conversation if they don't feel like they have a reason to have a conversation. So when a salesperson is sharing content with an individual one-to-one, it's just another way to stay on their radar and doing it in a way that adds value, not in a way that's selfish and, asking for something, but you're actually delivering value.
Absolutely. It's the KLT factor. All things being equal, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. That's Bob Berg quote. And so it's about building up that positive sentiment, building up that thought leadership. It's about serving the client, or the prospect. It's about presenting yourself as a resource, not that like annoying sales guy that you want to block or hang up on, right?
Exactly. Now, we also use a phrase at Vengreso that we've been kind of sharing out there, and I noticed a number of people have sort of embraced it. And that's the concept of vaulted content in the context of content for sales enablement, right? So why don't we explain what's meant by vaulted content?
Exactly. And, I want to clarify the difference between vaulted and gated, because a lot of people think that gated content and vaulted content is the same thing. So gated content is when, you have a piece of content and your buyer has to use, an email address to kind of buy the content, right? If I want to get access to that white paper or to that webinar or to that blog post or to that infographic or to that case study, I need to pay with my email address and sometimes with other information as well. That's actually not what we're talking about, right? That's gated content. We're talking about vaulted content. And this is when you create content as a company and put it behind a vault that your salespeople can access. And so whether it's using a sales enablement tool, a sales advocacy tool, like say Everyone's Social, or if you've got a G drive on your, company servers, but it's content that you keep locked away but accessible to your salespeople so that they can then pick and choose and share the right content, whether it's a case study, a research report, thought leadership piece, a tech brief, a case study. I already said case study, or even third-party content, but they can feed the right content to the person at the right time. But the nice thing about having it vaulted is it's usually organized in some way. And so the salesperson can find the right piece of content and serve it to the client at the right time.
Perfect segue, Viv, to where I wanted to go next in this conversation with you, and that's the organization of that content. because it needs to be organized in order for salespeople to access it efficiently. They have to know
Right.
what content they need. And in some cases, they may know what they need. In other cases, it needs to be organized in such a way that it can suggest to them what they need. So we talk about organizing content according to the buyer's journey. So
Right.
why don't we describe, and you've got a whole outline on this. So I'm going to tee it over to you and start to sort of roll that out, the new buyer's journey.
Exactly. And if you're going to be creating this vault, right? If you're the marketing department and you're creating this vault for your sales team, there are many, many ways of organizing it, whether it's by location or product or industry. But no matter which way you choose to topically sort your information, you absolutely want to make it very clear where that piece of content is associated in the buyer's journey, to your point. And I know a lot of people think of the buyer's journey as only being a 3-step, right? It's awareness, consideration, purchase. But actually, to your point, I think there's closer to 7 steps in the buyer's journey for content for sales enablement, when we bring in content for sales enablement, right? And so it's actually kind of a mix of content marketing and content for sales enablement, but it's the awareness piece. That's still number one, because if if your prospects don't know that you even exist, then why would, they're not going to buy from you.
Or create awareness, right?
Or create awareness. Exactly. So it's about creating awareness. And then from creating awareness, you really need to generate interest around your product, your service, your offer. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I just need to tell them what we do, and that's enough. But oftentimes it's not enough. I don't care what you do. How can you help me? So generating some interest and really focusing on points of pain or points of pleasure, for that matter, that adds a little bit of an emotional component to just creating awareness about a product, a service, or an offer. Sometimes you have to take it a little bit further. And certainly with viral marketing, you see this, where there's a level of instigation. So that becomes level 3. And that's where you see poopery is great for this, right? So you see a product that you're kind of pushing against what's an acceptable norm as far as marketing, but it works. Another one is Squatty Potty. They did such a great job with that. Or think about things like Uber or Airbnb. The instigation there is you think you need a hotel. You think you need a cab or to rent a car, but really here's a new offer. And so it's instigation, it's disruption. It's really getting, again, it's more education, and it's getting that emotional tie-in as well, to where you get to now consideration, which is of course still part of the buyer's journey, and purchase, still part of the buyer's journey. We've just added interest and instigation in there. And then after that, to your point that you made earlier, you don't just sell them one thing. Or if you think you're just selling one person one thing, guess what? You're not going to have a business for very long. So I've added a few more steps in my personal buyer's journey, which is satisfaction, right? So make sure that your buyer remains satisfied, whether it's a buyer of a $2 widget or a $20 million, software as a service offer. You've got to make sure that your client remains satisfied because, of course, and now we're on step 7, you want them to refer you, and you also want them to keep buying from you, and you also want to be able to potentially upsell them as well. So that's my step number 7 is repurchase, upsell, refer.
Okay. What I hear you saying, Viv, is instead of the traditional just 3 stages of the buyer's journey, you've got 7. And the idea basically in the context of this discussion of creating content for sales enablement is that we want to organize the content for the sales team in a way that's really simple for them to access and identify what kind of content they might need according to where they think a particular prospect or customer that they're working with is in that buyer's journey. So for example, if they have an existing customer, right? So that means they're going to be looking at stage 6 or 7, right? Satisfaction and referral. So they're going to be looking for content that the marketing team, the modern marketing team, has organized and stored in the vault under 6 or 7, right?
Right. Exactly. And, our salespeople are busy enough trying to sell our products and services and keep our company afloat and keep themselves afloat. So while you will occasionally find a sales professional who understands the power of content marketing and wants to jump in and create some of it themselves, whether it's video or blog posts or whatever, generally, they're too busy. And so you need to make it as easy as possible. So educate them on this buyer's journey, educate them on what it might look like for the client, the questions the client might be asking, the concerns that the client might be having. What are the indicators of the type of content or where they are in the buyer's journey? And then, just serve it up to them. Give them blog posts and videos and white papers and case studies that they can just grab out of that vault and serve up to their client or prospect.
So that means then that one of the responsibilities that has to evolve for the modern marketer is to identify when they're delivering content out to the sales team. Because it's one thing to just publish content that's out there in the public domain.
Right.
And by the way, that's another distinction we should make. Vault content can absolutely be, and oftentimes is, public domain content. It happens to be organized back in the vault according to where it fits into the buyer's journey. But then the modern marketer also needs to be communicating to the sales team where it fits so that you don't put that burden on the sales team to determine, is this article for stage number 3 instigation, or is it for stage number 4 consideration? That kind of thing.
Exactly so.
Okay. So why don't we talk through a few examples? I know you've got some, I've got some. And so I just want to give our modern marketer listening in some examples of content for sales enablement across the different spectrum of the 7 stages of the buyer's journey.
Exactly. And understanding that any one of these stages could be considered content marketing blended with content for sales enablement. So a lot of times you'll get a piece of content that serves both, right? Because it is content from the content marketing that's created by the content team being served up to the salesperson so that they can deliver it.
Although I will say, just on that one point, I will say the marketer can, in fact, and I've seen this done, produce content that is solely for the purpose of sales enablement.
Yes.
It may not even be in the public domain. It may be vaulted and exclusive to the sales team for use with their prospects and buyers across the journey, but it may not be out there under resources anywhere.
Right. And generally what I find is that when you get hyper-targeted content, you're speaking to a very segmented group of professionals within, a very specific industry, potentially within a geography, and you're speaking to their absolute points of pain, especially if the client or the prospect doesn't necessarily want that point of pain publicly known. You could still absolutely create content. It would just be both vaulted and gated for that very specific. And the more specific and focused a piece of content is, the more likely the buyer is to align with it and to feel like, he's talking to me, she's talking to me. That's exactly how I feel. Those are exactly the issues that I have. So that was a really good point, Bernie, and thank you for bringing it up. Because there are pieces of content that are going to be extremely customized, personalized, gated, and vaulted for the salesperson's use. And we want your first child too. But to back up, like in the awareness phase, generally we're looking at one to many because we're just trying to create more awareness. Now, it's not that the individual salesperson can't take that, say, produced video. I'm thinking specifically here again of the pooperies or the squatty potties, or that's very consumer based, but those produced videos, those big productions, like there's no reason why a salesperson can't take that video and share it with their audience, but it's a little less likely that you're going to be hitting the exact pain point of your client with the bigger generalized, video or the blog posts. Also in this awareness, marketing features or marketing platforms that are used in this awareness phase, ads. I mean, pay-per-click, pay-per-view, but ads, sponsored content, certainly, PR pieces are very much part of this awareness. And something as generalized as a website, that's actually content created, to create more awareness around a product or a service.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then we begin to focus in a little bit more, right? So then when we're in the interest phase, now we're really focusing specifically on the different buyer personas. So we were talking about the buyer's journey, but chances are your company has one or hopefully at least one buyer persona or you're in trouble. I mean, you might have more than one buyer persona, but this is when we start to focus the content towards specific buyers so that they have a little bit more of that emotional connect to the content. And this is where you might, serve them up ebooks or white papers, case studies, webinars, speaking to that buyer persona's specific point of pain. It's still general. It's still one to many, but you are looking at a buyer persona as compared to just like everybody out there.
Let me just give an example without naming anybody. You can have a study written 4 different ways. One that speaks to the technical buyer persona, one that speaks to the executive that's a one-pager and it's all about ROI, one that speaks to like the CFO persona that's all about, the cost of ownership and other financial aspects, and one that speaks to like the business person, the application person. Same case study, just
exactly
in different ways that appeals to each of those personas.
Exactly right. And that's the thing to remember. I think it was Jason Miller was talking about the Thanksgiving dinner approach to content marketing. You have your turkey, right? The turkey dinner. Yeah. So you got your turkey and you serve it up, but then later on you've got turkey sandwiches and then maybe you make it into, turkey soup. And so you have one piece of content that you can serve up many different ways depending on who your audience is.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now I do, instigation is a little harder. And the fact is not a lot of people, but it's not an absolutely necessary step in the buyer's journey. Some people will just breeze on right past instigation or disruption because it's not necessarily part of their company culture. However, what we see is that this disruptive content does get a lot of activity. It does tend to go viral. It does tend to get talked about a lot for good or for ill. I mean, we can see it happening today and I'll leave it at that. But, what do they say? There's no such thing as bad news. It's just news is news and the more visibility, the better. So the instigation piece is really your opportunity to differentiate yourself from other people with disruptive content by resisting the status quo, by challenging the status quo, by challenging your buyer's assumptions. And what happens is when you get your buyer thinking a little bit more deeply, you tend to get more buy-in. So while this step isn't, or this stage isn't for everybody, if it makes sense with your company culture, it's a very powerful step to include in your buyer's journey.
Yeah, I think it just takes a lot of creativity.
Yeah.
I think, one B2B example that comes to mind, even though it's more than 10 years old now, but when HubSpot was a brand new company, they were pretty disruptive in their approach to marketing software. They were even creating content around the whole concept of inbound, and they were using videos that were in fact very emotional, meaning they made you laugh, they made you think. Like you said, they challenged the status quo and they got you thinking about it, which endeared you to their brand to at least want to learn more. Not necessarily go buy it tomorrow, but to stay in touch with the brand and learn more.
Absolutely right. And the other thing that HubSpot did so well is they gave away a lot of content for free, which was disruptive because, my goodness, there were so many training companies out there that were charging $500, $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 for the very same content that HubSpot was giving away in its free HubSpot University. And not only was HubSpot giving away the information for free, you could get certified and you could use that certification to help you land more jobs. I mean, it was extremely disruptive, but not in, a lot of people think of disruption as having to be, a negative type thing that the end result is positive. But this was disruption of an industry, but by doing something extremely positive and really it helped to train an entire culture of social media marketers that this is the way to do it. And it really just shifted. And of course, social media, the industry itself was brand new at that time, 2009. So, it really helped to shape our entire industry, which is pretty disruptive when you think about it.
I agree. Viv, I love talking to you and we could talk for hours. But
we could, couldn't we?
Our listener will hang that long. So let's get through a few more examples.
Okay, yeah. So step 4, consideration. And this, this is a pretty traditional step in the buyer's journey. It's part of the original 3. And this is really when you're having that more one-on-one relationship with your client. So you're emailing them. You might be doing video email, something like One Mob, which is what we do at Vengreso. You're private messaging them on Facebook or on LinkedIn, or even, texting them on your phone. One of the things that we do, which is a little bit more public, is through our podcast, we interview. So we have these kind of one-on-one interviews like you're doing with me, and it's for the public, but really you're having a conversation with me and you're building a relationship with me. And that helps in the consideration phase as well. So consideration is where we really start going more on the one-to-one, and where we're using more of those one-to-one type tools like email and messaging and texting, etc. And then, as we move into purchasing, obviously we're having additional one-on-one conversations, phone calls, Zoom meetings. We continue with the emails and the texts, and we're helping our client make their purchasing decision. And then once they've bought, as we've mentioned earlier, that's where we want to keep them satisfied. That's where, our customer success officers come in, and where, customer success starts talking a lot with marketing and like, how can we keep them happy? How can we keep top of mind with them? How can we continue to educate and nurture them? Basically, just like dating, you don't want to ghost them. Once you landed the deal, don't ghost them. You need to continue to support them with forums, educational videos, as well as the personal emails and the phone calls, so that, you eventually, step 7, upsell, side sell, resell, or get more referrals from them, because it's so much easier to sell to an existing client than find a new one. And it's cheaper too. So whether it's through customer appreciation campaigns, referral initiatives, even cause marketing efforts that build that, very, very positive sentiment around your brand, all of those things go towards that step 7.
Yeah, I would even add maybe like influencer marketing or
influencer marketing. Yep.
Inviting customers to participate in, like you said, forums and groups. And so,
yeah.
Okay, cool.
And it's a wheel, right? One of the things I'm people aren't seeing us talk right now. So I want to make sure that people understand this is a wheel. It's not a triangle. It's not a list. It's a wheel, because you go to step 7, and then you're right back into creating more awareness about a new product. And then we're on the wheel again, and we're going around again. So it's a wheel. It feeds into each other. Everything here feeds into each other. Maybe even a web is a better way, because some, step 2 can sometimes, support step 7. And so it's a wheel, it's a web, but it's not linear at all.
Right. Good point. And I'm glad you made that point. We'll be back in a moment with my conversation with Viveka von Rosen. Hey, as a modern marketer, I'm sure that you work hard to produce content. After all, content marketing is an important element of the modern marketing mix. But do you produce content that your salespeople love? Do you provide your sales team vaulted content? Now, I don't mean gated content. I mean content that's behind a private access, and it's organized for salespeople by buyer type or some other criteria that maps to how they need to engage with their prospects and customers. Now, at Vengreso, we call this content for sales. It's content that salespeople love because they use it to build trust, and trust is the biggest factor with prospects. In fact, the LinkedIn State of Sales 2018 report says that 77% of decision makers won't engage with salespeople who don't have demonstrable insights about their business. Content produced and delivered to sales is one of the best ways to enable salespeople to build trust with their prospects and customers. Now, we have an infographic that illustrates this content for sales model. It's ungated, no form fill is required. I want to invite you to download this infographic, study it, and review it with your team. Now, you can access it at vengreso.com/content for sales. Of course, we'll link that up in our show notes. Now, if you go there direct, be sure to use the dashes between content for sales. Give your sales team the content that they need to engage in more conversations with qualified prospects. Again, get this infographic at vengreso.com/content-for-sales. It's also a good segue to my summary. I'm going to just because I know that by now the windshield time factor is the listener. So we begin our conversation, Viv, with really just a revisit to content marketing in general before we got to content for sales enablement. And we said that content marketing is really producing content that's from the brand. It's generally one to many, even if it's to market segments. And it's really about building visibility and attracting and retaining customers, influencing their buying decision, and then, of course, keeping them loyal. Formats are all over the board. We know them: print, video, web, etc., long form, etc. But we really focused the discussion on content for sales enablement. What is it? And it's content that the sales force can use to either create more conversations or influence those conversations, and of course, ultimately influence buying decisions. You made reference to the KLT factor, the know, like, and trust factor, and that is one big reason for in favor of even, implementing a content for sales enablement strategy. It is very much one-to-one, generally speaking. It can be shared on social, which, that can be social, that can be one-to-many, of course. But when it's shared one-to-one, it is really about sharing a specific piece of content for an individual, a specific prospect to, again, start or continue a conversation or restart a conversation, and ultimately also by delivering value, serving that prospect as a resource with value.
Exactly.
We talked about vaulted content. You made the point, the difference between gated and vaulted content. Gated is content that's generally for lead generation, meaning give me your email address and some other information, and in exchange, I'm going to give you some content. Vaulted content is putting it behind a vault, some kind of a digital wall for salespeople to access, and really giving it to them as sales enablement content. And it can be behind sales enablement tools or advocacy tools, or even something free like Google Drive, although I think it can be difficult to manage, but nonetheless, that's enough. But the point is that it's locked away, but yet accessible for the sales team. It needs to be organized. It can be certainly organized by product, by industry, by division, whatever. But ultimately, we've got to make sure that it's organized by buyer's journey. And that's where we talked about the 7 stages of the buyer's journey. And the first one, of course, is awareness. And it's all about either building or reinforcing awareness of your brand. So there's all kinds of content that we've been using forever on building awareness. And most of that is about the why, and some of the is about the how as well. But then moving to interest, it's really focusing on content that addresses pain points or pleasure points. You made the point of making that emotional connection, focusing on specific buyer personas where you can really make that emotional connection where the buyer can say, oh, yeah, this person really gets me. They really understand my situation. Then there's the third stage, which is really fascinating, the instigation phase. And you use the example of like an Airbnb, which is it's a place to stay. It's not a hotel. You need a place to stay. So content that makes that emotional connection, it's changing the status quo. It can even challenges the buyer's assumptions. We talked about how HubSpot is a good example in their early days on how they came out and instigated a whole new movement around inbound and created a whole new culture of modern marketers. So I think that's a great example. And then in the fourth buyer stage that we talked about, Viv, is consideration. And you used examples of like one-to-one content through like video, email, like we do a lot with using OneMob. Also even private messaging, direct messaging through LinkedIn, Facebook, Messenger, text, that kind of thing. And then even conducting interviews like we're doing here, even though we're publishing this content in the public domain, I know of companies that conduct interviews and then keep that private within their organization, and they share it with salespeople as content. Then the fifth stage that we discussed was the purchase stage. And this is, again, more one-on-one. This is calls, meetings, email, text, and again, sharing content that is continually building on that KLT, building trust, building value, and delivering on that during the purchase phase. And then once the purchase phase is completed, you enter the satisfaction phase. And that's all about keeping customers happy so that they remain satisfied and that they will continue to stay a customer. And that's where we can deliver things like customer success content, top 10 lists of how to do this or how to do that, and educational content and educational videos and that sort of thing. And that brings us to the seventh and final phase of the buyer's journey, and that's the repeat or the referral, where that customer is buying again or referring you to another customer. And that's all about showing appreciation for them, exposing them to things like cause marketing so they can really kind of love your brand beyond your product or service, but your company and what you stand for, inviting them into private groups and forums and that sort of thing, inviting them to be ambassadors for your brand,
Right.
that sort of thing. Reinforce why they bought from you in the beginning and why they want to continue to buy from you and also refer you to others. So that's my summary on content for sales enablement. Is there
Awesome.
anything, Viv, that you would like to add?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That's how could we add anything to that? That was
Thank you. There is one thing actually I left out, and you said this at the very end, and you said, and this is a key point, so this is my miss, but at least I'm catching it before we publish this podcast. You said, key point, Viv, that these 7 stages of the buyer's journey are not linear. They're a wheel. They're like continuous, right? They just keep going like on a web or a wheel, right? They're not linear.
Right.
We have to visualize it that way. To your point, this is an audio podcast. So I think creating that visual is important.
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic. Well, Viv, I want to thank you so much for, what my listener doesn't know is how long you and I have actually tried to put
I know, right?
I think it goes back to like episode, 25 or something. Who knows? But here we are, episode 237, the first episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. Thank you so much, Viv. Where can my listener go to connect with you online?
Well, probably the easiest way, and I hope Google still keeps serving it up like this, but if you Google LinkedIn expert, my LinkedIn profile is one of the first things that shows up. So you can always find me there, Viveka von Rosen on LinkedIn. I would just say customize your invitation to me just because I'm at my limit. You can always find me at Vengreso, Viveka, Viveka at Vengreso.com. I'm very old school and I answer questions when you email them to me. So if you have any questions about today, please feel free to email me if you want to. Otherwise, I'm LinkedIn expert on Twitter. I'm LinkedIn expert on Instagram. Not that I ever use it. I'm LinkedIn expert on YouTube, so wherever you find LinkedIn expert, you'll probably find me.
Awesome. I'm just going to close with Viv. You rock.
You do.
This wraps up another inspiring episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you want to share this podcast with a friend, let them know that we're available on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Podcasts. And we love 5-star reviews. If you are not subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. You can read the show notes for each episode at Vengreso.com. While you're there, sign up to receive the show notes delivered to your inbox through our weekly alerts. And be sure to also check out our Selling with Social podcast hosted by Vengreso CEO, Mario Martinez Jr. Again, you'll find our show notes at Vengreso.com. And that's 1 S in Vengreso. Tune in again next week when Bernie Borges brings you another inspiring interview to help you thrive on your modern marketing journey.